So you're creating a new cute little stop motion video, perhaps something a little like these synchronized ducks. But you want this content to sit natively on Instagram or TikTok. You want to frame your animation so that it fits the appropriate shape, the appropriate aspect ratio for that specific app or platform. But how do you do that? Well, I'm going to show you two methods, one using Dragon Frame directly and the other in Premiere Pro. So first off, what aspect ratios are most common? Well, Instagram tends to be square. That's a ratio of 1 by 1, or 1080 by 1080 pixels. But you can also use the ratio 4 by 5 if you want something a little bit more portrait shaped. This would be 1080 by 1350 pixels. How about TikTok? Well, that's just 16 by 9 turned 90 degrees. So you'll want to set your aspect ratio to 9 by 16. That's 9 wide and 16 high, or 1080 by 1920 pixels. So in Dragon Frame, everything you need for aspect ratios is in the bottom left-hand corner. You've got this slider here, which you can pull across to change the opacity of your mask, and then you can toggle the mask on and off with the little mask icon as well. Now a bit below that is the aspect ratio box, and here you can change your mask. So you can go to custom aspect ratio, and if you put in 1:1 you're going to get a square mask, which might be suitable for something like Instagram. You can again adjust the opacity. Now you can do any aspect ratio, so we could do 9 by 16, which would be a portrait phone shape. This would be appropriate for TikTok. Change the opacity depending on what works best for you. Some people like to see the rest of the frame. Other people would want it completely opaque so that you can just see the area that you're going to work in. Now I'm going to go back to a 1:1 ratio. I'm going to be working for a square for Instagram with this one. And I like to have my mask semi-transparent so I can see the rest of my frame as well. I know where things are. And so that I get everything in the right place, I'm going to use the drawing layers tool as well on this occasion to just mark where the ducks are, where I want them to pop up, because they're going to come up through the table, and I want to make sure that they're all within the square frame and in the position that they currently are in. So I'm just quickly putting a line under each duck, so when I take the ducks out I know where I want to put them back in. Guides are really useful for stuff like this, so definitely have a play with them and make use of all of the other tools available in Dragon Frame as well. So the issue you have as well with aspect ratios is not just setting up and masking the area and knowing where your action is going to take place, but also getting your video to export in that shape as well. And you can do this directly from Dragon Frame. So if you go up to File and Export Movie, you'll see that the frame rate of your composition and the aspect ratio are already preset in your export. As long as you have the box ticked to crop to aspect ratio, then it's going to export at the same aspect ratio that you set up in your guide layer. Now this is really useful because if you didn't need any rigs, so there's no rig removal, the animation is absolutely perfect straight from Dragon Frame. You can export it from here and it's going to be the exact size ready to upload straight away to Instagram or TikTok or wherever you're going to put it. If you're going to use the export directly from Dragon Frame, another tip would be to reduce the size in pixels. You'll have seen when I exported this one that it was the biggest size possible that I could export. Because we're capturing JPEGs, you can make your file quite big, and if you're then going to pull this into an editing software, it gives you a little bit of scope for zooming in and stuff. Now you may find that this first method isn't appropriate to your situation. You may need to remove rigs from your animation, in which case you're going to have to get your file in the correct aspect ratio when you bring your still images into your video editor. So now I'm going to show you how I would export my animations in different aspect ratios from Premiere Pro. So you want to go up to File, New and Sequence, and the first thing we're going to do is set up the sequence for that aspect ratio. Now in Premiere Pro you want to go down to the folder called Custom, and as you can see I've already got quite a few presets saved there which are for different sizes. So if we go to the Instagram one, you'll see that I've set this up for DSLR. I always go to a 24 frame per second time base, and You can change this if you're working at a different frame rate, but my default is always the 24 frames. And then the frame size, because we're doing a 1:1 ratio, is a 1080 by 1080 pixel size composition. Always make sure that you're on square pixels. The sample rate for audio is fine at 48,000 Hertz. And then at this point, you can save your preset and name it something appropriate, which means every time you reopen your Premiere Pro file, it will be there as a preset and you can just click on it and create your sequence. So it speeds things up. Now, let's look at the aspect ratio for TikTok. So this is a portrait phone shape. So everything's set up the same, DSLR, 24 frames per second, but this time the aspect ratio is 1080 by 1920 pixels. So here I have just opened a new composition in the 9:16. And when you create that new sequence, you'll see that the shape of your sequence has changed to be in that aspect ratio. So because I planned my animation for a Instagram post and a 1:1 ratio, let's open a new sequence that is 1080 by 1080 pixels. And what I'm going to do is I've already created my animation ready for this YouTube video. I'm going to select all those layers just with a copy and paste them into the new sequence, which is my square. Now, if I render that, you're going to see how some of the action is still currently clipped out of the square frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just need to adjust the size of my picture slightly to make sure that I don't lose any of the action. So I'm going to just choose a frame where you can see that purple duck on the left-hand side. I want to make sure there's a bit more space there. So I'm just going to move everything across. And what you can do in Premiere is you can right-click and then copy. And that's going to copy all of the attributes associated with that picture. And then you can select all the other pictures and paste attributes. And it will scale all the other images by the same amount. So now when we render out this sequence, everything should look great in our square shape. You can see everything is now fitting much better within the confines of this aspect ratio. So I'm quite happy with that now. So I'm going to export this from Premiere. So to do that, you want to go up to File, Export, Media. And to ensure that this comes out at the correct aspect ratio, you'll see this export settings box, and it currently has black bars on each side of the square. It's going to export it by 16:9. We don't want that. So you want to go to Scale to Fit and select Change Output Size to match source. And this is going to create a 1080 by 1080 export, which is the same size as the sequence that we set up. Now, you're going to have this on the format QuickTime, but you can have the compression as H.264, which is an MP4, and you'll see that the size is exactly as we want it, 1080 by 1080. We've got it at 24 frames per second, and I'm just going to choose where I want this to get saved. Another thing I do is I always check the end of the timeline and make sure that there isn't a black frame at the end, because on Instagram specifically, you often want your animation to loop. So I always reduce the end duration by 1 frame, and I always make sure that use maximum render quality is selected as well. Then we're literally just going to hit export. When this is all exported, you can open up the file and you'll see that it is a square, exactly as we wanted. And you've achieved exactly the same result as you would have done if you had directly exported from Dragonframe. But this method means that you can edit all of your stills in something like Photoshop, do all your rig removal, pull them into your editor, and you can still export at the same aspect ratio and dimensions that you had planned for. This video was requested by one of my patrons, Stephen. If you like what I create on this channel, why not become a patron too? You get free access to all my premium Skillshare content. Plus, if you have a great idea for a video, I'll likely make it and shout you out as well. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this helpful. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.